So it's been a little while since we've done a Razor project. So today we're actually going to be building a pretty rare bike. This is the OG Razor MX350 that came with front and rear suspension from the factory. As you see, it's got the swing arm that's separate from the frame and has a rear shock up here. Here's a closer look at the stock suspension fork. I believe this one is a 2008 production. All the newer ones that you see nowadays have a rigid fork and rigid frame where there's absolutely no flex in between the swing arm and the frame, which I think is a downside. I don't understand why they didn't just keep it this way. These are pretty hard to come by nowadays, and I got this one from my buddy Nate. So you can see it's not in perfect condition. It's got a couple broken mounts. The plastics are all plasti dipped. I think this is one of those that changes colors depending what angle you look at it, but I'm suspecting that the plastics are kind of beat up under it. We'll find out when we take it apart. But it's not running, the batteries are dead, and the tires are flat. But the frame itself appears to be in pretty good shape. So I'm gonna try to keep this as original as possible. I don't wanna alter it too much since it is a pretty rare bike. But we're definitely gonna be replacing the stock 24-volt powertrain, which I believe has a 250-watt output back in the day. And we're gonna be replacing all that with a 60-volt setup with at least 12 times the amount of power. This thing is so old, the plastic's just like crumbling apart. You know, the seat itself is actually in very good condition. There's not a single bit of a tear on this. So I'm gonna keep the original stock cover, but this plasti dip definitely has to go. That was a little bit of a pain in the ass, and it is mostly because whoever applied the plasti dip prior sanded all the plastics down as if they were going to paint it regularly, and they were prepping the surface for the best adhesion. So usually plasti dip's pretty easy to peel off on a smooth surface, especially if it's pretty thick how it's applied, but this was applied thin and on a sanded surface, so it was peeling apart. I actually ended up getting blisters on both of my thumbs. But overall, the plastics actually don't look too beat up. This one's got quite a few crease marks, but I'm gonna hit all this with a heat gun. Try to make sure that it's as straight as possible. It's not too bad. I'm gonna resand everything and prep it for paint, but we're gonna do this portion a little bit later on. I'm gonna get a closer look at the rest of the bike and see if anything else is damaged and what needs to be replaced. So I was just looking at the motor and found the production date. It's actually made in 2006, so we're rebuilding a 20-year-old Razor MX350. I decided I'm just going to replace this banged up handlebar with the original one from my 2022 Razor MX650, which is actually the first bike that I've ever had on this channel. As you can see, barely used it since I actually upgraded that to a hydraulic fork, my first year of ownership. And this stock MX350 bar has got rust under the surface and the bar mounts are all oxidated. So we're just gonna put some fresh ones on from my MX650. I'm also not gonna be using the stock throttle or the stock brake, stock old grip. The factory rear wheel and drum brake assembly is such a pain in the ass to work with, which is why I'm so excited to replace it with a 72-volt, 5,000-watt hub motor from Econic Cycles. Now, we're not going to be running this at 72 volts for now, but if you look closely, this motor is rated 5,000 watts. This is actually meant for the Video bikes, but I decided I'm retrofitting one on this MX350, and I've actually seen people push almost 10,000 watts out of this single hub motor, which I think would be absolutely insane on an MX350. but it's also bringing other advantages such as quieting down the drivetrain noise since there's no longer going to be a chain or a tensioner in place. It also allows me to use a disc brake rotor, so we can convert this to a 160 millimeter mountain bike style brake. But it also has a 44 millimeter 6-bolt pattern, similar to what you see on a mountain bike, so we could run disc brakes on this thing. Now what I'm really curious to see is if the inner tube on the front tire actually still holds air. I'm really hoping it does because I personally don't find it very fun replacing inner tubes. Actually seems pretty good. I'm gonna take the front wheel off and then I'm gonna let this sit overnight just to monitor it and confirm it actually holds pressure. Now we pretty much got it down to bare frame, which I mentioned is very rare, so I prefer to keep it as original as possible. What I'm gonna do at this point is pretty much bolt check it throughout just to make sure nothing is loose, clean it up as much as possible, and take some steel wool to some of the surface rust portions just to bring it back to life and make it look as clean as possible before we start the reassembly. Turns out we gotta wait for some supplies, so we're just gonna work on the plastics for the meantime. And then for paint, I decided to go with Rust-Oleum Custom Gloss Nardo Gray. And before you start spray painting anything at home, make sure you have the proper respirator that's designed for the job. And if you're interested in checking out any of the supplies or the parts that we're using for today's project, I'll have everything linked in the description below. You can also get yourself 5% off Econic Cycles by using discount code PATOutdoors. I just remembered that the front number plate was completely broken, so we're just gonna install the one for my Tudio, get this one paint matched with the rest of the panels. While the paint on the plastic is still curing, let's go work on cleaning up the frame. I'm just gonna hit it with some Lysol to get it all degreased and scrub it down with a 3M Scotch or scuff pad. Then we're gonna hit it with CLR, try to get some of the surface rust off. And here's how the frame turned out. I think it cleaned up pretty well. Obviously, I can't do anything about some of the deep scratches and some rust under the painted surfaces, but I think the CLR stuff worked really well on the surface rust on the shocks. Like, look at that. It almost got rid of all of it. Though it didn't work quite as well on the kickstand, it kind of turned it brass. I think it's just simply a different material, but the CLR stuff did really, really well on the rusted shocks. Now before we can mount the rear hub motor on, we still need to install the brake rotor and also make sure that the brake caliper adapter that I bought will be compatible with this thing. I think I actually have to drill this hole much larger since this is meant to work with the stock rear wheel, which has a much smaller rear axle than the new hub motor. For brakes, I'm just using this ZTZ Cycling mountain bike brake kit that I got from Amazon, which obviously comes with 2 calipers, 2 brake handles, 2 brake cables, and 2 brake rotors, which are pretty similar to the Zoom brake kits that I used on my previous Razors, but the bolt pattern on this is 44 like a mountain bike. We're only gonna be using 1 set for this bike. I'm gonna save the next set for a future build. I'm probably gonna end up using the shorter cable. Oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to re-drill this much larger in order to get it through this rear axle. And the closest drill bit that I have is a 1/2 inch. I'm really hoping that that's gonna work. Dang, we're gonna have to go a little bit bigger. I might have to go out and buy some. For the meantime, I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm able to do. For the grips and the throttle, I'm just using this kit that I got from Hot Packs, which was pre-wired for a far driver controller. I ended up stepping out and getting a step drill bit. Since the rear hub motor has a 14mm axle, I'm thinking that 9/16 should create enough clearance. Yep, perfect size. The brake kit came with 2 calipers, obviously. One has a 140mm adapter and the other one has 160. Make sure you use whichever one matches your rotor, and it should line up perfectly. Then to mount the rear hub motor on, I'm just going to be using 4 flanged nuts, 2 M14 nuts on the inside, and then the 2 that came with the hub motor on the outside. I think the overall clearance actually worked out perfectly as far as width. It's interesting, this is actually the first hub motor I've worked with that comes with 2 sets of phase wires. This brake kit that I got from Amazon came with brake cables that are pretty much cut to length. And here's a closer look at how the plastics turned out after curing overnight. Certainly not perfect, not as glossy as I was initially anticipating, but I think it looks pretty good for a spray can job. I probably could have done a little bit better with the prep work. I also could add a layer of clear coat if I want to make it glossier and a smoother surface. But overall, I think it's a huge improvement from where it was. Yeah, this fender and front number plate combo definitely looks a lot better than the originals. I'm gonna wait till we finish installing all of the electronics and cleaning up all the wiring before we install the seat and the rest of the body. For the controller, we're gonna be using a far driver ND7250A. This controller is able to support from 48 to 72 volts, 50 amps continuous output, 200 phase amps. It's also got the built-in Bluetooth, so you don't have to buy a separate dongle to connect to it. Came with a main harness, some hardware for the cover and for the phase wires. I got this from Econic Cycles. I think it was a little over $100. It's the smallest controller I could find that's able to put out at least 3,000 watts. I ordered a Hall sensor adapter separately since these far driver controllers come with this big plug, which is for the newer style motors. This hub motor came with the old style, so this adapter should convert it. I just don't want to hardwire anything permanently in case I decide to upgrade the controller and the battery on this bike in the future. These hub motors don't come with the Hall sensor connector pre-installed because you still have to run the wires through the axle nuts. Just throwing on a XT90 connector. This is the battery lead. So far driver controllers have so many features, but we don't need to use all of this to get this specific bike running. We pretty much just need the hall sensor connector, the signal wire for the ignition switch, 3-pin connector for the throttle, and a 3-pin connector for the speed switch that's built into the throttle that we're using. I might need to switch 2 of the wires for the throttle, but we'll see if this one works. I forgot, the signal wire for the throttle needs to be connected to the positive terminal. So before we clean up any of this wiring or even mount the controller, I want to make sure that everything functions correctly, or that the controller at least turns on. The battery I'm using is this Amorge 60 volt, 10 amp hour lithium battery pack that I previously had made for an electric mountain bike project, but unfortunately things didn't work out with the CYC motor kit that I previously ordered, so we're going to be reusing it for this project. It's got a peak discharge of 70 amps, 50 amps continuous, so it's perfectly mated for this controller. I'm going to key on and it should beep. Okay, so we at least know that the controller is getting power, so I know the ignition switch works correctly. I'm not going to test the throttle or the speed switch until we program this controller. So let's switch over to the POV cam. Okay, so I have the bike on a dirt bike stand because we have to have the hub motor elevated when we're programming the controller, since we need to have it free spin front and back while it's doing the whole self-learning mode. Key on. Battery's fully charged at 67.4 volts. Let's go open up the Far Driver app and connect to the controller. Should be this one, ND72V50A. First thing we got to do is change the voltage to 60 volts and save. Open Pro NBLE. We're also going to change pole pairs from 4 to 15. I thought that this motor is a 15 pole pairs, which is not an option here, so this might be an issue. I wonder what happens if I select 16. All right, so the mode switching button works, so I know that's wired correctly. Auto learn. Seems like it's not happy about something. I'm suspecting it has something to do with the throttle wiring. Since there's not a lot of stuff hooked up here, it's pretty simple setup. Hall sensor looks good. Ignition obviously works, and so does mode switching. It must have something to do with either the pole pair setting or the throttle. I'm gonna try switching out the green and the red pins on the throttle connector and see if that makes the error go away. Still doing the same beeping. All right, auto learn. Oh. That grinding sound that you might be hearing is from brake rotor drag, which I'll be adjusting shortly. I just need to center the caliper. It's when the brake rotor is not centered perfectly between the brake pads. Seems like it's running pretty smooth. Shoot, is that really it? That sound you're hearing is just a little bit of brake drag, which obviously we can adjust. I'm just gonna go back to Pro NBLE. Reek response, already set at 0. And these ratios and speed look completely different than what I'm used to. Like, this is the first time I'm using a hub motor with a Far driver. I usually use this with a Socian or a QS mid-drive motor, and all the RPM settings are completely in a different range, so I have no idea what I'm looking at. Seems like the low power setting is just gonna be too little for me, so I'm just gonna set it to 60% or close to 60%. Same thing with speed, and then I'm gonna keep it around 80 for the mid gear. The Far Driver app's a little bit clunky like that sometimes. So to summarize, on mode 1, I have it at 60% speed and torque,
80% at mode 2, and 100% on mode 3. My settings are super basic. I currently have pole pair set at 16 just for this initial test, 60 volt for the rated voltage, 200 phase amps, 50 line amps, which is proper for this battery. And I left the ratios and speed alone since I'm not that familiar with hub motors. But even with just the base settings, it seems like it runs really well. So this is mode 1. Nice and smooth. Mode 2. Mode 3. Seems like it's running really smoothly. And the disc brake also seems like it's working well. You can actually see a little bit of tire expansion. Man, this thing is so quiet. All right, let's start cleaning things up and putting this bike back together.
And here's the general idea of how I'm gonna have everything mounted. The far driver controller I have pressed up against the top side of the frame. It's got such tight tolerance against the heatsink that it doesn't even shift forward or back or side to side. Then I have some adhesive Velcro straps on both sides, so these straps don't just slide off. So the controller is not going anywhere. And the battery I have placed directly behind it, and I have majority of the far driver harness bundle under the battery. We're just gonna have to strap the battery down, and we're also gonna have to trim the side covers. I know a lot of people don't even bother running these, but I wanna keep the build relatively clean, especially with the covers on. I also wanna reduce the amount of debris going to the electronics area as much as I can. I actually found these 2 slotted holes at the bottom of the battery tray to be able to put a strap through, which worked out perfectly for the battery. And here's a rough idea of how I'm thinking of cutting the side plastics. I'm just gonna cut out a box on the top side and then cutting out a box on the back side as well. I'm still gonna leave these top sections alone because I want the original mounting points to still be present. And just like that, this 20-year-old first generation Razor MX350 is ready to get back on the road. Something really unfortunate happened in the car. I had a scooter inside that slammed against the bike when I floored it, and it scratched the paint, but it's not too bad. I can always touch that up later on. I'm out in Springfield. I'm gonna be riding with my buddy Caesar, who's got a SX350. What year do you think this is? 2020. I think these newer bikes still come with a drum brake assembly and a 350 watt 24 volt powertrain. How fast does this thing go? 540. I'm super curious to see how this new setup is actually going to go. I haven't done too many hub motors. I'm thinking that it's probably going to be in the 30s, even with a 60 volt. I've done a mid-drive setup on a MX350 in the past, but I figured I'd just try something different this time. Newest generation SX, oldest generation MX. Which one would you take? Oh man, I forgot how small these things are. So as you can see on Caesar's SX350, there's absolutely zero suspension. The swing arm's one piece with the frame and the fork is rigid. Is that pretty much maxed out for you? Yeah. So a stock SX350 or MX350 goes about 12 miles per hour on the GPS. All right, let's see how fast this thing actually goes. Okay, I'm not even gonna bother with the lower modes. I'm just gonna go straight into mode 3. It definitely doesn't have as much torque as my mid-drive setups, but this thing rides super smooth. You can barely hear anything. All I hear is tires rolling over the pavement. If I were to guess, that's probably around 30. Okay, so that was 28 miles per hour. I'm gonna open up the Far Driver app and see if we can make a few changes to the tune.
Right about to be dead.
Oh man, dude, and it's just started raining. I'm gonna change the limit speed to 1,000. I also changed the ratios and speed so it stays at 100 for a longer period before it starts tapering down. All right, let's see what that does. Not gonna lie, the geometry is a little bit funny. The wheelbase is so freaking short on this thing
It feels really agile, but pretty jittery at high speeds. Like, I honestly can't imagine going much faster than this, especially with the stock drum brakes. At least this has the new disc brakes, which work pretty well. It actually locks up the rear pretty easily. Okay, so new top speed is 33 miles per hour, which is certainly a huge gain in comparison to a stock unit. I'm gonna cruise with you. Oh, this is a good move. What the heck is that? You just slide it on a grip? See that? Freewheel noise.
Are these the stock handlebars?
That's a MX650 handlebar. Oh, this thing's got a decent amount of torque. This has the 48 volt battery from my VipQ H3 combined with the ENC MY1020 and the stock fire driver controller from my Yasma. Definitely makes a lot more noise than that hub motor bike that we were just riding, but it's got a noticeable amount more torque in the mid-range. Hey, do you jump this with your Talaria?
No.
What do you think?
Dude, it's so nice. It's so quiet. I should have worn my Ninja Turtle back there.
Yeah, it's not that fast, but for some reason, it rides just like super smooth.
Yeah, dude, it's like a Mercedes or...
I guess if you compare it to this guy needs to weld his freewheel and get rid of that slack. Or just go with the belts and shit, belted setup. But I like bigger bikes like this, personally.
Starting to get some speed wobble. Oh, man.
Well, that's the thing about those short wheelbase bikes is they're a little bit sketchy once you pass 30 miles an hour.
Yeah, definitely felt around maybe 30.
Yeah.
Maybe a little over, I don't know.
I don't know, that bike's a little too small for me personally. I like SX500s and MX650s a little bit better for what I like to do, which is mostly trail riding, occasional street use. It's certainly not one of my most powerful builds, but that wasn't the purpose for this project. I simply wanted to restore an old classic and give it a more modern brake and powertrain setup. It's good to see this 20-year-old Gen 1 Razor back on the road, but the next Razor build is gonna have at least 10,000 watts of power. So make sure you stay tuned to the channel if you want to see the MX650.